I wish you a very good new year. Some of you may remember that 1 year ago, I defined the overcoming of geopolitics as the most important goal for 2018. And many of you probably thought, geopolitics, what is that? Is that really the most pressing issue? And I maintained that because geopolitics was the source of 2 world wars, that we could not continue with such a confrontational policy in the age of thermonuclear weapons. Now see what happened in the year which just passed. You had an enormous amount of breakthroughs where many regions of the world are in a process of overcoming geopolitics. Just to name a few, you had the historic summit between President Trump and President Kim Jong-un in Singapore, which is leading to a process of rapprochement between the 2 Koreas. Then you had all of a sudden Japan working with China on the Belt and Road Initiative. After the very important summit in Wuhan between President Xi Jinping and President Modi, China and India are now working together on projects. And after the election of a new prime minister in Pakistan, there is reason for careful optimism for the relationship between Pakistan and India. Also in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, you have nations which did not have any relations or negative ones, namely Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia. They are now working together on infrastructure and have diplomatic relations. The entire African continent is filled with a spirit of optimism because of what China has been doing there, which is now also attracting investments from many other countries around the world. But maybe the most interesting of all of these developments is the announcement of President Trump that the United States is going to pull out of Syria. Now, this is causing a big irony because many of the people who were screaming, "Ami, go home," just a few years ago, are now saying the United States absolutely must stay there. It will lead to chaos. It just gives a gift to President Putin and Rouhani and so forth. Now, think about it. Isn't it better that Trump makes good on his election promise to end the permanent wars of his predecessors? And he has promised the same thing for Afghanistan, that after futile efforts to solve the situation in Afghanistan militarily, there is now the intention to solve it through negotiation, to involve all the big neighbors of Afghanistan. So isn't it better to go in this direction, try to seek solutions through diplomacy and negotiation? However, there are still some forces who are absolutely sticking to the old geopolitical paradigm. That is the British government. Look at the recent report by the House of Lords, which is a masterpiece in geopolitics of the worst kind. Then there is naturally the EU and unfortunately also the Berlin government. They absolutely insist, that their rules-based order must be maintained. But, this is really not very convincing. And I would actually urge you to find out for yourself which way is better. Look at the New Year's message of President Xi Jinping of China, which is a very proud listing of all the incredibly many accomplishments China has done this past year, all the industrial parks, the beautiful bridge between Macau, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, and many such projects. China has lifted 10 million people out of poverty in 1 year alone and is confident that it will basically lift all the remaining poor out of poverty until the year 2020. And this is a message of somebody who cares about his country and his people. And please look at this message yourself, especially because of all the anti-China hysteria going on. And then compare that New Year's message with the one of Chancellor Merkel, who finds it important to stress as the most important occurrence of 2018, that she announced her resignation. And otherwise, is just more of the same and doesn't offer any vision whatsoever. Now, I think we are in front of dramatic changes in this coming year, 2019. It is not yet clear what these changes will be. It is clear that the old order is disintegrating. A new order is emerging. And what will be exactly the parameters of this new order, the principles, is also not yet decided. But I think if we look at the concepts of previous great thinkers of humanity who had the vision of the one humanity, who had the vision of a harmonious development of all nations, there are such thinkers we can ask for advice. One of them is Confucius. Another one is Nicolaus of Cues, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, and naturally also John Quincy Adams, and many others, but just to name these few. So I think that we are at an absolute historic branching point. We can shape a new era of civilization where we overcome geopolitics for good. And I would ask you, work with the Schiller Institute so that we can convince the remaining nations who are still sticking to the old ways and get especially the European nations to join the new paradigm. And we can make a fantastic future if we work together.